I would actually advise to find whatever company gives you a chance to do product management, even if it's an early stage startup or not a well-rounded company yet, and just do the job, right? Do it for a year or two and then gain some experience and move on, right?
The team of co-founders have to have shared values and complementary skills.
And I think this is what I wanted to change when I met my co-founder. And then we started to actually think about a proper business idea with a market opportunity, with the problems we wanted to solve that we had.
Like from your experience working at all these different, startups and these kind of like side projects you're working on, and from your experience at June, what would you say are kind of 2 or 3 like real big, kind of light bulb moments which kind of made you realize this is what I need to do if this is going to be successful? This is what we need to do as a team and a company if this is going to be successful.
One is, he says, look for people with a lot of intellectual honesty. I'm not sure he used the words intellectual honesty, but something around that, where he says basically, you want someone who is honest to himself or herself. You want someone that, whenever you have a hard conversation about the business, the decisions you need to make or one to each other, then you really, really want people to not bullshit themselves, right?
Hello, my folks. This is the TWIP podcast, the Website Intelligence podcast. Thank you that you're watching. Today we have Enzo Avigo from june.so. He has an extensive background in the product management, but we will dive deeper into that. Together with me, we have Matt Sarson, who is the CMO of Visitor Analytics, and I am Dragos. I'm the head of enterprise at Visitor Analytics. So, guys, Enzo, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Dragos. Thank you for having me, Matt. Great to be here.
Perfect. So let's dive into the first question then. So Enzo, where did you grow up and what would you say was unique about being there during your younger years?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question because when you say that, it feels like I've done, another achievement yet in my life, which I don't really feel I'm up there yet, but it's actually a good exercise for me to reflect a bit. So I kind of grew up between Paris and the countryside, an hour away from Paris, where my dad came from. And I think it was a good balance between, living in a big city and getting the fast pace and, the cultural mix of a big city and like kind of the excitement and the culture and so on. And kind of like having the more chill side of things with the countryside. Dad is an entrepreneur. He had a couple of companies. So, every time we would go to the countryside, I would see him work on his company and things like that. It was super inspiring. And I guess Paris with my mom was just like a much more grounded place where I did my studies and so on. And I think it was just a good mix for me because kind of like I got the creativity from my, countryside childhood and kind of the freedom to express things. And there was this workshop that we had where you could build stuff with wood and that's how my brother turned into an artist basically. And then
sorry to cut in there because you mentioned your father was an entrepreneur, and we saw this with many of our guests that they're coming from an entrepreneurial background. What exactly did he do?
Yeah, he had these consulting agencies. So he was advising governments basically on all kind of like politics, especially in regards to environments. Kind of before it was trendy. Now it's kind of a trendy thing, but in the 70s, 80s, so working in the environments, you were kind of a pirate. So yeah, he did that for quite some years, but he has had a lot of companies. When he tells me the stories, like it's insane. He first worked, for a petroleum company in the late 60s, then sold his first agencies against a diploma. So I think the first deal he made was to get his diplomas because he didn't get any when he was a kid because he was just like, not a good student, and then realized he should have some diplomas. And so he has built a lot of different things over time, but he has always been this very creative person too. So, very into painting, arts. I think he could have been like easily a painter. He could also have been a cook. I think he's a really good cook. So kind of, touching a lot of things.
Sounds great. like Dragos said, like we've had so many people. I think every single person who's come on who's a CEO or a founder, they've all said the same thing about their parents. Like one of their parents was an entrepreneur. They were around business as they were growing up. It's funny, I wasn't, and hence I'm not so entrepreneurial. But Dragos was, and so many of our guests have been as well. It's really interesting. Given that kind of varied and very interesting kind of childhood, what would you say was the first thing that you really wanted to do yourself when it came to career, like during those younger years?
Yeah, I think it changed a lot. Between my like primary school and secondary school and onward, I think it was always something around creation and craftsmanship. Building things in a way, in a broad way. I think when I was in primary school, I wanted to be an artist, like maybe a painter or a sculptor. And then I think in secondary school and high school, it was more like being a musician. So I started to play like a lot of music with friends and so on. But at the same time, I kind of like realized soon enough that being a musician was quite challenging. And so I kind of like gave up on a lot of like childhood dreams to get specific aspects of these dreams. So for instance, like I'm not a musician, but I still play music, things like that,
Yeah, sounds good.
Matt, you can relate more to this because you have a background in music.
Yeah, I guess I'm very similar in that respect. Like maybe not in terms of the like parents and the kind of environment, but in terms of like having dreams about being a musician or being a writer. I studied creative writing. I wanted to be a writer, film writer, these kind of things, and a musician at one point as well. Also a football player, just thrown into the mix. Yeah, with that back in the day, back in my previous life, I was known to spit a few bars. But yeah, I'm the same as you. It kind of morphed into something where very disconnected from music and very disconnected from those early dreams, but also bringing in some elements of them. It's interesting. And because a lot of your earlier kind of career was in product, right? Or did you have other roles like prior to this?
Correct.
And if it was product, you feel like you have quite a creative approach when it comes to the kind of product like focused work you do.
Yeah, for sure. So before product management, I worked in finance, in market finance. So I worked for like
first job.
It was my first job, yeah, in market finance. I worked for a French bank called BNP in Hong Kong for a bit over a year. And so I just had graduated from finance studies. And I did a very quick internship into like the finance department of a company. And I found it very, very boring. But I really loved maths and in finance and this kind of like, graph and things like that. And so then I kind of moved into the other side of finance, which is market finance, and in a more fast-paced environment because I was very bored in my first job. And so kind of like being a trader was probably like the fastest moving environment I could join. And it was great. It was great fun. Learned a lot of things. But I think after a year in that job, I kind of realized it wasn't really what I wanted to do for the next the next 20 years. And kind of like it's a fork of your life, like when you're like 23, 24, you're doing your first job, you kind of like want to grow into that job and becoming great at it.
Yeah.
And you kind of need to think through, right, whether it's the right job for you. And there are a couple of turning points in my career at that time, but basically something made me want to change at that point and reconsider my choice. And this is when I kind of shifted into the tech world and product management.
So moving on to product management, you moved straight away into tech, or you had some product management roles outside technology?
I started right away into tech. So one of the advice I often give people is if you want to do a job, do it. Like, there is no such a thing as like getting a lot of experiences and then after a couple of years being able to do the shift, like which is often the case of what people do to get into product management because, there is no real product management diploma. I would actually advise to find whatever company gives you a chance to do product management, even if it's early stage startup or not a well-rounded company yet, and just do the job, right? Do it for a year or two and then gain some experience and move on, right? So for me, There was this turning point where basically I remember I was on a retreat with a couple of entrepreneurs. The retreat was called Mangrove. I remember these people really well. I met that guy, Maxime. He was doing product management, and he told me what he was doing. Like, look, guys, I'm doing that thing. It's called a roadmap, and then there's some tickets and sprint. I was like, oh my god, so it seems so cool, right? And I wanted to move into tech, but I wanted also to become a generalist. And there are very few roles where you can be a generalist in a tech company, right? Maybe some biz roles, biz ops, things like that. And then on the product management side, I think it's one of these, right? So I try to look for companies that could give me a chance. And actually, what I did is I used my background in finance as a red line to find my first job. So my first job in product management, I was like an associate PM, like very, very junior. But I was working for a fintech based in Berlin called N26.
Yeah.
Actually, it used to be called number26.de. Now it's N26.com, and it's like very, very amazing success. And so that's where
they're doing work around fintech, no?
Yeah, they're fintech. They're a mobile app. They're like a mobile bank on your phone, and with Revolut in the UK. I think they're the two leading companies right now. So turns out
it's an interesting,
massively successful. And now when you look at
I was going to say, it's a really interesting sector. There's all that stuff around Starling Bank as well. Who's the other bank? There was Starling and another bank, and they all started together. And then the CEO kind of fell out with all the team, and they formed a new bank themselves. I can't remember which bank it was now, but Starling became one, and then the other one also became very successful. And with N26, I used to work in fintech. I used to work in a Luxembourgish fintech called LuxHub in the open banking space. And I could just see N26 just, growing in numbers, just like constantly every single year. And still today, I think that they're continuing to grow.
Yeah, they're massive success. I think the neobank kind of ecosystem has plateaued a little bit because now the adoption is very deep, and I think a lot of the traditional players have caught up. For instance, in France, we have this phone provider called Orange. Yeah. You also have it in the UK. I think it has a different name. They basically announced their mobile bank, neobank, like a couple of years ago. And like now, finally it's here, and finally you can see the product, and it's pretty good and so on. So the market is kind of like now being a bit more, atomized. But to answer your other question, Dragosh, on the creativity and design, one of the things I realized very early on in my career is that I have an appeal for creativity. And even though it's not the leading point of my job, like I'm not a designer or I'm not a painter and so on, it's one of the top 3 priority in my job. So I need to be exposed to creative people, or I need some aspect of my days or of my week to be creative. Otherwise, I feel very, very sad. Like, I just ask myself, why do you want that? And I just feel sad if I don't get exposed to that. So when I started doing product management and started to work with product designers, that touch point with product designers really resonated with me. And I just found that, having someone doing it for me, but tell me how they were doing it was great. And it's like, if you think about music, Matt, it's like going to a concert, right? You're not a musician anymore, but probably you take a lot of pleasure to go to a concert, right? Yeah. And so you're just watching now, but you're getting exposed to that. And maybe it's a way that, makes you happy and fulfilled. And so I think that's where kind of like creativity have launched for me, and has kind of like landed for me. It's kind of bad.
But in a way, you always thought in the back of your head that you wanted to be an entrepreneur. Did you always, maybe even before, did you try any project on your own, or did you had any thoughts while you were working for another company to start on your own? And if yes, in what kind of areas, what kind of domains did you look at?
Yeah, I knew I wanted to start something since I'm very young. I mean, very young. I knew since I'm like 22, but I think my first approach was like, okay, let's work in finance, make some money, and with that money, build a business, right? That was my first approach. And that's basically the approach that everyone in finance will tell you. But actually, at some point, you get stuck in finance because you make so much money. And you have so much investment in your life, like, the apartment, the car, the dogs, whatever, that it's very, very hard to leave your job just because the sunk cost is too high. So I left that job in finance. I think I took 5 years in tech to reach the salary that I got in finance. So the cost, like the actual financial cost of switching from finance to tech is like 5 years of your life. Can you imagine how much of a cost this is? It's crazy. And actually, I remember when I switched to tech, I was like, okay, now I'm going to actually learn a skill that I'm going to reuse when I build my company, because I knew I wanted to build a tech company. And so if you're a finance person, then, well, you build a tech company, what do? You maybe have some like business skills or management skills, or if you have like an operation AV play, maybe you're going to be very good at it. But at the end of the day, it's not really skills that are going to be 100% relevant, right? While product management was one of these skills that I knew I could apply to then build the first product that my company would have. And since I was very attracted by products, since I'm young, like, the first mobile apps on iPhone, things like that, I kind of like knew upfront that this was going to pay off. The problem is that at some point of my product career, I was going to be like this very senior product person that is less hands-on, which is great, right? I have no judgment for that. But I was kind of like at the fork of my life where I was either going to be that manager in a product company, in a tech company, or I could use the skills that were still very hot and fresh to actually build something. And so at this point, I had to make a choice, met my co-founder, and that's how we started the company.
And when was it that you founded your first company in this kind of area? When was it that you kind of started developing your first, product of your own?
Oh, since a while ago. Like, I think that job at N26, the first one I got a use case back then. And the use case was like to reframe or reshape the referral program, the program that people use to invite each other in the app. Mm-hmm. And actually what I did with that use case is I turned it into a side project that I launched on Product Hunt, and the thing became quite viral and got product one of the day back then.
Okay.
A few thousand, signups because there was a newsletter, things like that. And so I've kind of like always repurposed things in my life, whether it's a user interview or a book I read or whatever, into some side project. But I think they were always very short term, narrowed. Like they were never like for the long term.
Yeah.
I think something I realized much later on is that it's fine to start something without a head start if you know where you're going to bring it in the long term. And actually, this kind of like launch that I used to make, they were quite exciting, but there was no real business behind them, right? And so I was kind of like shooting myself with adrenaline doing them, but I didn't really have a proper like business purpose. And I think this is what I wanted to change when I met my co-founder, and then we started to actually think about a proper business idea with a market opportunity, with the problems we wanted to solve that we had, yada.
By the way, how did you meet your co-founder? Because many entrepreneurs are struggling with this topic. They have this kind of idea and you have one way to search for a co-founder on the internet somehow. I know there are some services doing this, also forums and stuff, but also real life, in your context, in your, let's say, influence zone, try to find a person who can actually be in synergy with you. How do you go about it?
It's a tough one. I'm not going to lie, it's a really tough one. I think the best advice I was given, I read an article a couple of years ago, and the best advice I was given is A, use a methodology to filter the people you want to work with. And two, once you have applied this methodology and you have found some people, write them an email right away. Like, just write these people. So if you have like 10 people in your network on LinkedIn that you know could be good founders, and you want to build a company, like, don't, go around it and just pretend and start a conversation. No, just like open LinkedIn right now, send 10 messages to these 10 people saying, I have this idea, I'm working on something, I'm thinking about something new. Do you want to be part of, are you considering starting a company? Do you want to be involved? Just do that. And
just to make things clear, it wasn't a childhood friend or a acquaintance of yours.
So that's the method I would advocate to use. In my case, the person was in my surrounding. It's someone I work with at Intercom. We were in the same product team. I was a product manager there, and he was a product engineer. And so we got exposed to each other on a project. Then he moved to another product team, so he was not in my team anymore. But I had his name on top of my list. And the one day when I was kind of ready to bring someone in and like accelerate on the ideation, I pinged him and I actually told him, like, look, dude, you and I, we work for someone else, but I'm considering starting something for me. And do you want to, talk about it? So I think, so I mentioned like, how do you reach out to people, right? What I haven't mentioned is how you meet the people, right? And you're right, Dragos, the way you meet the people is extremely important, because the more you can de-risk the relationship with the person, the more chances you have to succeed as a founding team, right? I think people you were in school, people you work with are really the ideal people to work with, but sometimes you don't have that, and you can still make it through by reaching out to people in your network or friends of friends,
Out of interest, you mentioned having this kind of methodology to trying to create like a criteria for the kind of co-founder you'd like to work with. Can you give us a little bit of insight into what that would kind of consist of? Like, what kind of elements were you considering as part of this?
Yes. So the methodology to use is the one from Naval. You probably go Naval on Twitter. Is this very inspirational American person from the... Exactly. He has written this article, I think, called like "How to Find Your Co-Founder." Something very, Naval-ish, very grounded, very straightforward.
The Navalism.
And I think the Navalism, is it an official term?
It is now.
It's great. It is great. Naval is a legend. Yeah, and he has this article where he shares like 5 or 6 points. There are 2 that really resonate with me. One is, he says, look for people with a lot of intellectual honesty. I'm not sure he used the words intellectual honesty, but something around that, where he says basically, you want someone who is honest to himself or herself. You want someone that, whenever you have a conversation about the business, the decisions you need to make or one to each other, then you really, really want people to have not bullshit themselves, right? Because the main reasons why you're not going to launch something successful is not because you're not going to be able to talk to people, or not because you're not going to have the right intuition and so on. It's like all the bullshit that you put between you and this reality, right? And if you're not able to see the reality, then you're doomed, right? You're never going to make it. The reality is already so hard to understand and process and consume and interact with. And it's so hard to get the right intuition, the right timing and so on. If you put these layers between you and that, you're not going to make it. So I was looking for someone very, very honest. And I think that was the first thing I looked at. And maybe the second point, and then I would invite people to read the article. The second point he had was kindness. Kindness is something that you would not hear a lot when people look for co-founders, but I believe it's very important. If you work with someone who is kind, it's going to change your founding team. It's going to help you not having arguments, which is one of the first reason why startups fail, because the founding team just collapse. And smart, nice people, kind people are just more ambitious. Because they're kind and nice, things typically tend to be more approachable or realistic. Sometimes they're a bit naive too, right? Which is, I think, is a great quality to have. And so I was looking for someone extremely nice, right? And my co-founder for Ucha is like literally the nicest person you've ever met. I've never heard him say any kind of shit on anyone, which is completely insane. Even if someone like is bad to him, he will still be kind, which is insane.
Yeah, I heard this. Maybe it sounds corny, but I heard this thing on Shark Tank, actually. They say that the team of co-founders have to have shared values and complementary skills. Maybe you heard this term before.
This one are very famous points. Yeah. Complementary skills come all the time. I think is very important. Shared values is like a wedding. Shared values is like the wedding, right? Like there is this, survey that you make on people that are married, and after like 90 questions, you're able to give with a 90% predictability if they're going to stay together in the 10 next years. And the one criteria that makes it or breaks it is the shared values, is the vision of the couple, like just the same vision, right? And actually then some other people did a similar analysis for founders. And what they found out is that it's the same. Like if the founders don't have the same vision and the same shared values and where they want to go, it also has more chances to fail like a wedding, right? So completely aligned on this one.
I didn't take that test prior to getting married, but I'm happy to say I think I would have passed it. So things are okay in that respect. Like from your experience working at all these different, startups and these kind of like side projects you're working on, and from your experience at June, what would you say are kind of 2 or 3 like real big kind of light bulb moments which kind of made you realize this is what I need to do if this is going to be successful? This is what we need to do as a team and a company if this is going to be successful.
Oof. There were a lot of moments like that, I think, in the companies. I think the first one was the first version of June before we left our job, before we actually considered turning that into a job, a full-time job and a startup, was a Figma extension. And what we would do is we would help people annotate the Figma file, so the design file, with like track events, so things they wanted to track in the the UI screen they were designing, right?
Mm-hmm.
We launched that, got some good traction on the Figma plugin store, and I think what we learned is that we had this crazy roadmap where we wanted to iterate, the Figma extension, and I think what we realized is that we were not owning the user experience. We were depending on someone else, right? And even though we're a big believer that you need to reduce friction in your product if you want people to adopt it, which was the case for the Figma extension because we're just literally one click away from the file people use already, we kind of realized that it would be extremely hard to build this empire, this unicorn that we have in mind on top of someone else just being integration, right? And so we had to rebuild everything. It was like a nightmare. And then we had to build like, the admin, the login, like all the things that don't deliver value and you don't want to build them. But kind of like we realized that you couldn't be a new unicorn by being just like an integration on the Figma store, right? So that was a big moment. And we took 3 months to rebuild the API and the infrastructure at this point.
Were you able anyway to learn quite a lot in terms of, what the kind of final platform like UI would look like based on the experiences of those people who were utilizing your product as a plugin? Could you take learnings from those initial periods?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were many learnings, but the first one was it wasn't the right place to actually build the company at all because the Figma file, the design file is disposable.
Yeah.
You have used it, then you kind of like throw it away, right?
Yeah.
And so basically we're building this crazy product where we would tell our designers, when you build something and the engineers has implemented it and you don't open that file anymore, well, now you're going to open it again because on that file, you're going to get some metrics, right? Like thread completion rate or whatever, right? And the designer were telling us or the PM and the engineer, because everyone collaborates now on the design file, they were telling us oh, I like the vision. I understand what you want to make, like this visual analytics, but something is going to be wrong with this, format where it's happening, right? And so that was for us a red flag, like that we should completely shift the medium that we were using for this company. Big shift.
I wanted to ask you just to transition a bit into your current role at the moment, coordinating, let's say, june.so, and maybe also disclose a bit what you guys actually are doing, because I find it also complementary what we are doing at Visual Analytics. We're doing website intelligence or website analytics. So yeah, what exactly is june.so and what is your current role, or what are your main focus areas, let's say?
Yeah, so
I'll just jump in. I'll just jump in very quickly. I think you keep referring to the kind of mid-90s cult film, Juno. Do you remember that film? Because it's June, isn't it? not Juno. Sorry, carry on.
It is June. Juno was a great movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's June. But for some reason, you're not the only one where I go to say Juno. I think the name Juno's just stood in people's mind, and now
maybe you have to change the brand.
Yeah, or maybe there is a O at the end of our name, and so people take the name at the end and put it back. But yeah, it's true. It's true. June is very easy to explain. It's the simplest analytics for product teams. So we're simplest product analytics for B2B SaaS. So if I break the two parts, simplest means we're kind of like a Google Analytics for product. So plug and play, you put a snippet, it works. It's pretty magical. And for B2B SaaS, what does it mean? It means that the way B2B SaaS works with product analytics is extremely different than B2C. Typically, you want to look into your accounts. You don't want to look into your users. And you want to make sure that the accounts are healthy, they activate, it goes through all the stages of the journey of your product. And there was also a lot more collaboration happening with the sales and the success teams. So typically June integrates with your CRM and you can do all kind of crazy magic with it. So, and I agree, it's very complementary to website analytics, like what you do. I think we're like on the two sides of the login, your pre-login or post-login. You can put June pre-login, you can put your product on the post-login, right? But we're just not made for that really. So I think they're they're the two sides of the mirror in a way. It's very cool.
And just for those listening, we would highly recommend that option.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, carry on.
Sorry, I was going to ask you, what are your current main focus areas at the moment? What do you maybe struggle with the most at the moment in growing the june.so?
Yeah, I mean, I always forget the second part of your question. Thanks for reminding me. So I'm the business co-founder, I'm the CEO. So I take care of everything kind of beside product now. So I completely move away from product. Used to do product for like 2 years in the company. By product, I mean like being mainly focused on product. Now I'm doing go-to-markets. So I'm in charge of like all the go-to-market strategy, whether it's inbound, outbound, and then all the topics you can think about within these two focuses. I think my two main focuses at the moment are positioning and monetization. We are in that phase of the company before Series A where, you know, we're accelerating the business, and we're big believers that nailing the positioning and the monetization strategy is what will get us there. So on the positioning side of things, I think by now with the user base we have and the visibility we have, I think we have proven that we're onto something. And I think what we really need to get now is a way to define our product in a unique way so that everyone knows that, you know, if they want a simple analytics for a B2B SaaS, June is by far the best product out there. I think, you know, it's what happened with all the video calls platform during COVID that started to boom. If you look at this market, it's pretty insane the market share that Zoom took. And I'm a big believer that the reason why Zoom went so big is because they positioned in a better way. They became, you know, in people's mind, there was this very professional, robust looking video call platform that wasn't living in a browser, it was an app that you would install, but that would you know, give you like this very kind of, again, robust and kind of solid experience that professional people were looking for. While, you know, other players position more like on the webinars, or other players position other on kind of like making it fun, you know. And I think that's why Zoom won, right? And so we're big believers that if we nail our positioning the right way, it will work better for us. That's the first piece. And the monetization, I think that when you monetize early, in the right way, the right people, the right price, then you generate revenue that you can reinvest in your company to build a better product. So a lot of the companies that are the most successful actually tend to monetize early. And then they use that, again, as a competitive advantage to tell their customers, look, it's not free. Maybe it's not going to be cheap even. But that money that you're giving us is actually going to help us build this best product, world-class product for you. And so we're working hard on like the monetization for the product, basically. And that's my two focus. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. One of the, I think, I'm not sure if it's so much within, you know, your specific kind of post-login part of the sector, but definitely pre-login. One thing I've been thinking a lot about when it comes to monetization is the fact that Google have kind of created this perception that web analytics or even product analytics doesn't cost a lot. So, you know, there are companies prepared to spend thousands and thousands and thousands on CRM or social media analytics or these kind of things. And then when it comes to web analytics or product analytics, it's kind of like, oh, we have to pay for that. You know, I thought Google gave it for free. And of course, everyone knows they don't give it for free, but it's created that perception. Do you find that to be a challenge when it comes to this kind of pricing approach within the sector?
At first, yes, we did, but I think we were kind of biased. So, you know, when you start, you're like, okay, what are all the alternatives? Especially when you start doing your pricing, and you're like, okay, actually, if people implement Google and analytics and they hack it a lot, they can partially do what we do, right? And so you're like, okay, people are going to anchor on that. So I think we initially thought that, but I think what we realized that the target market we have actually doesn't really consider Google Analytics. And so we were anchoring on the wrong product. You know, if you look at Google's product in general, you will always find alternatives which are 1,000 times more pricey. So let's take Gmail. You have Gmail, which is free, and then you have Superhuman, which is this premium client, email client, which is $30 per month, right? And when you think about Superhuman, you're like, no one's going to pay for Superhuman. Gmail is free, right? Well, turns out that the people that buy Superhuman are mostly investors or CEOs, whatever. And for them, spending $400 a year, $360 per year is nothing, right? If they can, save an half an hour per day, right?
Yeah.
So for us, I think what we realize is that the more we work with B2B SaaS, the more we realize GA is not an alternative. And so it doesn't really hurt us. And actually, it's a way to disqualify people. Like if we talk to someone and they're like, oh, June is $150 per month, but GA is free. We're like, oh, okay, you're not the right person. The right person that wants to, is happy to spend a couple of $100 to save, hours every week. And that's who we're going after.
Yeah, it makes a lot.
But I think in your case, it's a bit different. Is it?
Yeah, I definitely think that when it comes to, once the cost gets, starts to scale quite a lot as the volume of traffic, obviously scales a lot. So we talk about the kind of more enterprise companies, or even the companies that, could be smaller, especially e-commerce, but get huge amounts of web traffic. Obviously the cost becomes a lot more than it does at the initial, basic package level. And then you start to get the comparisons. We could pay, we can get this, a similar kind of solution to this, for free. So paying huge amounts seems like a big leap. But for me, it's something that will eventually be overcome for various reasons, because of privacy, because of UX, all these various different things. Eventually, the people who are going to really want, a long-term solution that's going to serve their needs, are going to have to go for the actual quality, as opposed to believing the myth that Google Analytics is somehow free. One other question I had is with regards to your kind of GTM.
By the way, do you know?
Yeah. Carry on.
By the way, do you know the price of Google Analytics when you buy Google 360?
Yeah, we looked at this. It's very high. Yeah. That was one of the arguments we had. How much was it? Were you going to say?
It's $150 per year flat.
Yeah.
So Google Analytics is free unless you go in Google 360, and then it's flat price.
Exactly. This is one of the arguments that we were using.
This steep price, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when looking at our pricing structure and working on this a little bit, that's exactly what we're thinking is, we might face some kind of, defensive from certain people with regards to price when they have this perception of Google Analytics being free. But in fact, the enterprise users are already used to this very high value or high priced solution as well. So it's not such a blocking point. When it comes to the GTM you talked about, you mentioned before that obviously Figma was the wrong place to build. What have you found to be the right place in terms of channels and in terms of, where you're finding your customers? And also just in terms of, getting them into the product? How have you gone about doing this?
Yes. So the channels that works the best for us are inbound related. And I think it's because of the industry. I think people are pretty knowledgeable about analytics. It's a space that existed for quite some years, And so if you go to them and you're like, oh, we have this brand new analytics, they're like, oh, okay, we heard about analytics 100 times, right? But what are you even going to talk to me about, right? But inbound is like a very different motion where people are more experienced and they're more decision makers, and they're like, okay, I want to explore alternatives to, what I knew already, because I think there might be a better way, because now it's 2022, and now soon it's 2023, right? And so for us, it's been all about inbound. And I think because of this really, this mindset that people have. And in terms of analytics, usually the decision makers are pretty sophisticated. It's usually a founder or product manager or something like that. And these people they don't like to be told what to do, right?
Yeah.
So for us, it's inbound. Word of mouth works really well. Content marketing works really well. And social media kind of works also pretty well. We try to be quite active on LinkedIn and Twitter. So, as an early stage, then we try to be focused.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask you also, because you mentioned inbound marketing. Have you seen any specific tactics, let's say more towards the grassroots, which worked for you and clicked with your potential customers pretty well?
Yes and no. in fairness, word of mouth is always what works the best for us. So we think about, go-to-market channels as like wheels, gear. And then there's a huge one, which is word of mouth. And then there are small ones that activate the biggest ones, and kind of the biggest one is always word of mouth. So whatever we do, whatever tactics we do, small things we do, it kind of amplifies the user base that then kind of amplify in a much better way. So I would say, instead of going into the tactics that we tried, I would say try to build like a great product and kind of try to push the word of mouth if you can with other kind of tactics, because this is what's gonna spread the fastest for you. This being said, you can also work on the word of mouth, right? There are stuff you can do to try to provoke that word of mouth, right? So small delighters in the product, touch point that people wouldn't expect. I think they can get you a long way.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you on this note, because I lived for a couple of years in the UK, and for instance, Revolut is pretty big also in Eastern Europe. And they, on top of the fact that they're having a pretty nice product, to be honest, and but they're having this crazy double-edged referral system. And I think this could amplify in a way the word of mouth. Did you brought any tactics, let's say, or go-to-market tactics from the fintech industry to what you're doing now?
Yes, a few of them. So one of the things, so the referral at N26 was insane, but it wasn't insane because you build a referral program, because the referral program would be pretty basics. Like, if you invite 5 people, you get 10 euros. If you invite 20 people, you get that. The referral programs usually work if people love your product. And then, of course, if you build the referral program, because you're basically productizing the process, and people can get something, right? When I joined N26, I think the referral was on average 6. So people would refer on average 6 people, and there was no money outcome. Like, you would just refer and you get nothing, just your friends on the app. And so I think this is the living proof that you don't need to give people something to people to get the referral program to work. And other way around is also true. Sometimes you have an amazing referral program, but people are not going to share because they don't really like it. In general, in B2B, it is said that usually referral programs work a lot less because it's not your own money, it's your company money, usually, that you spend on the B2B SaaS. And so you tend to be less price sensitive or less sensitive to rewards in general, right? So we haven't built a referral program at June for that reason. One of the things we've done, though, is at N26, we had this how moment in the sign-up flow. So basically, as you were onboarding, you had to do a KYC, which is a step where basically you need to authentify yourself, which is a compulsory step when you open a bank account. And at N26, we had this video call. So you could start a call with an agent that would identify you, you would show your passport, and they would open your bank account right away. So it was quite magical because you didn't have to go to a branch and give the paperwork and things like that. And it turned out that that was just a way to basically to save some money and make sure like we were fully digitalized. It turned into a aha moment. Like, people were talking to each other about like, hey, I opened an N26 bank account. I only had to do a phone call. It was magical. And then 2 days after, I got my credit card home.
Yeah.
That thing is that the sooner, yeah, go on, mate.
I was going to say, I remember seeing a comparison between all of the banks, the neobanks and traditional banks, and how many steps are required to set up a new account, and the difference between 3 or 4 steps from the neobanks and then like 30 plus steps for the traditional banks. And, having that traditional experience and then going, wow, hang on, I've set up, it took a couple of minutes. That's definitely something you're going to share. So it really works in that respect.
It's amazing. And I think the learning, if I had to summarize it in a few words, is that you can have a aha moment in your sign-up flow, and you can have multiple aha moments. And so basically, one of the things we try to do at June is make sure that when you sign up, there is this delightful moment happening very, very soon. And so for June, it's quite easy, right? You connect a data source, and then right away you get your graph and reports and all kind of crazy stuff. And that plug and play aspect for product analytics is completely new. I think you wouldn't get that out of the box.
Super stuff. Just staying on the same note on the marketing side of things, I think we can move and talk a bit about your website. How are you going about your website? If you made any tweaks or changes lately, are you using in a lead generation process or kind of paradigm let's talk about your website a bit. How would you think about
I
it?
mean, we think of a website like a product. We iterate on it all the time. So we're checking the copy of the hero all the time, seeing if it improves the conversion rate. We are rebuilding it again this week. We've rebuilt it like maybe 5 times in the last.
Are you doing also the small tweaks on your branding, or just website focused will be the
Website focus. Website focus. Nothing other branding. We think it's a bit too subjective. Of course, it can increase the conversion rate, but we're not doing like conversion rate optimization yet. We're more doing like the big stuff. Like, our conversion rate is like, I don't know, 5%. How can we make it 8%, right? Or it's 8. How can we make it 10, right? We're trying to go for the big swings here. So we iterate on it all the time, and I think we try not to have our engineering team working on it. We have someone freelancing with us because we think it's not kind of complex enough for the engineers that work in the company to do it, but it's very important still, right? So we're very careful with when we work, and for us, since we're product led, the website is very, very important. It's the first impression you're gonna have from June, and if you think of June or signing up on the website or using a product as a love relationship, it's like the first time you see someone, and that first time will always play an important role. So we're very, very careful about, the assets, the loading time, the copywriting. Like a small typo can really hurt your brand. And also we're very obsessed with the positioning, because one thing we learned is that the chances to activate your customers and to monetize them and so on comes from how you position early on. Like if you say something, and then the right people sign up for that thing, and then you deliver that thing, you're going to build a more healthy business than if you don't position on the right thing, because maybe you don't sell the right thing and people are disappointed, or actually you could position the right thing but people don't know you have it, so you have a missed opportunity, things like that. So again, as part of my positioning work right now, I'm very obsessed with the copywriting we have on the website.
And when you're making these tweaks, to the copy, to the kind of positioning, messaging, and to other elements of the website, what kind of data and analytics do you use to kind of measure the success of these things and to try and determine what is working, what's not working? So what kind of key metrics are you looking at in this respect?
We're doing things very simply here. We look at visits, and then signups, and then we do the conversion rate. Actually, I think recently what we started doing is look into the users instead of the visits, because it's another way to measure it. And one thing we want to do, but we haven't done yet, is remove the people that come on the website to log in.
Yeah,
because we have a login button, right? So we should remove these people from the people that visit your website if you want to have a correct conversion rate. I think it's something we're going to do in the coming days.
Sounds great.
I was going to ask you, because you were mentioning the redoing of your website. Are you looking at the moment at any benchmarks, or do you usually go about doing things like this? I mean, setting benchmarks or looking at the best practices in the market. Do you have any, maybe even from other kind of industries? Do you look at any other websites which inspire you?
It's actually funny that you're talking about that, because we are big fans of our benchmarks. We actually launch our own product benchmarks. It's june.so/benchmarks. And so they're not conversion rates benchmarks, because we don't do the marketing side of things. We do the product side of things. But obviously we were interested into the conversion rate of the website. And what we did is we talked with investors and asked them like, hey, you work with so many portfolio companies. What do you see elsewhere? And this is actually how we learned that there was such a big missed opportunity for us. We talked with a lot of investors, and they told us like, hey, we have this portfolio company. This is the number they have. This is the number they have, right? And of course you have the outlier. Like you have this company, they have like 18% conversion rate on their website. And you're like, oh my God, 18% would be the dream, right? But obviously it's tough to reach this kind of numbers. And so that's how we realized that what we thought was maybe like more optimization in the beginning. We thought just changing the website was going to be optimization. It actually turned into more like, okay, actually, if we move the needle here, it can really have a big impact on our company, right? So benchmark, I think, are very, very important. You need to be careful with how you treat them. They need to be relevant. So I think there are two things that are important for relevancy. first that it's the right industry, a similar industry with and also a similar go-to-market motion,
Yeah.
And I think the second thing is the year. The year, like if you compare a website 10 years ago, it's not relevant. Like the web has changed too much. Like we have mobile phones, the attention span we have is way different. Like the expectation bar is just so different. You need to consider that.
In terms of wider technology that you're using, like both in your role but also just broader across the entire company, what would you say are kind of like the key pieces of tech that you have at your disposal that you kind of really rely on for what you're doing?
Yeah. Do you mean products or tech like languages, frameworks, libraries we use in the product? What are you thinking about?
So more products, more the kind of products you're using. So I assume you're using June itself. But aside from this, like what other products are you utilizing kind of, on a day-to-day basis that really help to steer what you're doing?
I mean, I'm not going to be very original here, but maybe I can try to bring a couple of original points to it. I think Slack has been surprisingly good for us. We initially treated it as, just a chat, partner, chat tool. And now I think it's growing massively. So it became like a key workflow tool. Like whenever something happens in the company and we want people to be notified in live or semi-real time, then we're going to integrate it in Slack. So feedbacks of the customers are in Slack. Our metrics are in Slack once a day, once a week. We can receive them. We have a native integration for June, but if it's not in June, then we use a Zapier integration, something like that. And now we've shifted our video calls in Slack. And now there's this kind of concept of a workspace where you can pin stuff and so on.
Yeah.
So it's slowly replacing the need that we have for wiki. We use Notion for wiki, most startups. But honestly, Slack is doing so great these days that I can totally see ourselves switching from Notion to Slack in the next 12 months. I don't know if this is what they want to do, but it's a potential scenario. So Slack has been absolutely insane, and I wouldn't like to be in front of them right now or against them, just because, these guys deliver. These guys really deliver.
Yeah, they do, and we are using Slack also internally. You can do all sorts of things, even communications. We even organize ourselves with external partners on Slack, having separate Slack channels with external partners, which is a way better working situation than using email or some other sort of communication devices. It's so much easier.
I agree. It's magical.
Yeah, it's magic. I definitely encourage you to move towards Slack, 100%. But moving to the personal side of things now, do you use any kind of piece of technology, or do you in a more habitual basis, let's say, or by day to day? I don't know, doing sports or listening to music or even productivity apps. Do you have any suite like this?
Yeah. So one, there are quite a few products. I think I really like Spotify. I don't know, Matt, we talked about music at the beginning. For me, it was really hard to shift to Spotify and to a streaming platform, just because I was obsessed with my iPod and downloading songs and, having all the covers and so on. And I didn't want to give it up on all of that. I wanted to have these songs and, give them to my children, things like that. And actually moving to Spotify really changed a lot of things for me. The discovery pieces of the product are just too good. And actually now it's part of my life balance. I know that every week I'm going to discover at least a new artist that I love. And knowing that, the morning when I start my week, that there is a recommendation that is waiting for me. And out of these 25 songs or whatever, 20 songs, I'm not sure, there will be one artist I'm going to have a crush on. And then I'm going to dig all the albums that the artist played in the same week. Just makes my week really, really excited. So, Spotify or their competitors, it changed stuff. They're great.
Yeah, I was exactly the same with Spotify.
Use them?
Yeah, I was identical. Exactly what you're saying. I had my CD wallets. I'm pretty old, so I had my CD wallets with all the kind of inserts in there and the CDs in there, and I reluctantly then kind of moved across to having an iPod. Even the iPod was like a kind of there was friction to me moving across from CDs into there, and then I was just YouTube obsessed. I just search everything on YouTube, and go down these rabbit holes of music. And then when I found Spotify and I eventually got Spotify Premium, I was just like, right, okay, now this makes sense. Now I can stop looking now for other solutions. I can put my CDs in the loft. It's okay. And fully move across to Spotify. So I completely agree.
It hurts a bit also because I wouldn't say they damage the music industry, but I don't think they help too much the artist. Depends sometimes they draft a couple of our artists up to the top of the charts. But I'm a big Radiohead fan, and when Spotify started, Radiohead was like on a guerrilla going on a at war with Spotify. So I kind of like feel.
Yeah, what did they do? They released an album in a weird way, didn't they? I can't remember what they did now. I'm a huge Radiohead fan. My favorite concert ever was Radiohead playing at South Park in Oxford, which is where they're from. And they must have been in 20. No, hang on. How old am I again? It must have been 2001. I think I was 18.
21. Yeah.
And it just incredible.
I've seen that video.
Yeah, so good. It was just immense.
And yeah.
I remember when they released an album recently, and maybe when I say recently, maybe it's 5-6 years ago, and they did some guerrilla move with it. Like it was kind of released in a I think it was for free, and they released it like through some like different way.
Yeah, it was in rainbows, and you could pay as much as you want. So you could give €0, or you could give €1, or you could pay the actual price of an album, and they would give. I think they would probably give that to a charity or Greenpeace, something like that. Talking about the products I love, I actually write about the products I love. There is a section of the website called Great Products. So if you go on june.so/great products, I write every 2 weeks about the product that I love with screenshots and the features that I'm obsessed with. And it's
You're silly. You're doing some sneaky media moves there at june.so. Because actually it's a big trend in terms of B2B marketing. Actually, lots of them are morphing into these media companies, having their own contests, having their own media moves,
Eventually, every tech company become a media company, right? The question is like, how fast do you do the shift, and how much you invest into that, right? But we worked at Intercom with my co-founder. Intercom was a media company. Like the head of content, John, back then, he was working for the Irish Times, right? He was literally coming from the Irish Times. So if that's not what a media company does, I don't know what it is.
So moving on to go ahead. Sorry, Matt. Yeah.
No, carry on. I was just going to say I'm checking it out now. I'll definitely take a look later as well. The great products.
I was going to move on to the next or the last segment of our podcast, the aspirations segment, and I wanted to ask, what are your areas which you are focusing at the moment for you to grow as an entrepreneur?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm usually focusing myself on what the company needs. So usually on every Monday morning, I have this reminder in my calendar that says, what's the biggest blocker in the company? Like, it takes 10 minutes and answer that question very honestly, right? So whatever is the biggest blocker will become my area of focus. So let's say, biggest blocker is like positioning or having the perfect positioning. Then I'm going to spend 2 months or less, maybe 2 weeks, becoming an expert of positioning, right? Reading all the things I need to read, meeting all the person I need to meet, and make sure that I make things happen, right? Like that they're real, not just like on papers, whatever. So I'm shifting all the time to answer your question. And I think that's my job. I think it's the job of any co-founder, is to be able to ramp up very quickly some skills and then let it go, pass that to someone, or if it's something that can be just closed, just move on. So these days I'm reading a lot on positioning, working a lot on go-to-markets, how to make, to build up the right channels, ping them up, accelerate them. So it's my core focus.
I believe you've lost Dragos, hopefully temporarily. That sounds good. When you're doing this kind of research, I completely agree. I have to always, whenever I'm kind of shifting my focus slightly, I also go away and try to, quickly learn as much information as possible. When it comes to doing this learning, is there a kind of specific platform or place that you tend to rely on a lot, or you just, generally jump into the internet and see what you can find?
It depends. It depends. What I try to do all the time is I try to break down between learning and execution. So I wouldn't, let's say there is something hairy I need to learn, whether it's a book or a conversation or a platform. I'm always going to look for the most actionable content. So if I can get like a 10-minute video about it or a great or summary article, I'm going to go for that. If I go on a platform and there's like 2 videos of like 2 hours each and it's 4 hours, I'm not going to be able to do that, right? So what I'm going to do though is going to make sure that, let's say it's a multiple weeks project. I'm going to make sure that on week 1, I get some learnings that I execute against these learnings. Yeah. Then on week 2, more learnings, I execute week 3 and so on. So I built a muscle where I actually learn by doing, which I think is probably the most important piece. Welcome back, Grzegorz.
Hey again. Sorry for losing you guys.
That's fine. We're it's all part of
about the learning curves.
Yeah. That sounds great. And I guess it's also advice to other entrepreneurs, right? And I guess, to be honest, it's like really a key ingredient for any entrepreneur. You have to have that mindset, right? Where you can go and learn new things all the time and digest that. And like you said, have an actionable approach to it. So rather than going out and kind of filling your mind, make sure you can execute on it quite quickly. What other kind of key elements of advice would you give to, any kind of budding entrepreneurs out there who are looking to kind of, maybe set up their first tech product or tech company, for example, in terms of what they should do, getting started and kind of progressing from there?
Should we make this a top 5 or should we leave this section for a couple of minutes later?
We can make it a top 5.
If Enzo has 5, would be even perfect. If not,
top five means I get just very crisp 5 points, right?
You can elaborate.
Okay, we develop on. Yeah.
I'll try to give it a shot. So, okay, I'll take the story that we told today, right, in the chronological order, right? So if you think about how you can get started, and when I moved from market finance to product management, I think the first tips is acquire some skills that are going to be applicable for your company. I think that's an important one. Actually, if you go one step before, when I left finance, I think another tips would be don't lose sight of your dreams. Because I think it would have been very easy for me to get pulled by this other job and wake up one day and just, it would be too late or it would be too complex. Something else that I really like is try to always live below your earnings. So if you live above your standard and your earnings, then you're going to be dependent on your salary. And then it's going to be very hard to say no to money. And most of the hard choice that you make in life and the best choice to make in life, they're because you optimize on learnings or experience rather than money. So I think it's a very important one to, not be overly attached, or let's say you make 5,000 euro a month, not spend more than 3,000. So if you want to take a cut and move from a job that pays you 5 to a job that pays you 3, it's not painful, right? So don't get overly attached to that. I think that's very important. Then I would say be intentional about things. Like we talk about meeting a co-founder. I think you can bump on one of your co-founders and just make it happen. But I think you have more chance if you're intentional and one day you wake up and you're like, I want to meet someone. I'm going to spend some time meeting someone. And the last thing is do something you like. Or you love. I don't think you can be great at something if you don't love it, because especially if it's going to take you 10 years. But it's not applicable to everyone. I've seen some people that, don't love the problem they solve and they're still very good. So maybe, listen to your personality. Some people, are you a passionate person or not? If you're a passionate person like I am, then take a problem that you love, because it's going to take you a lot of time.
I guess also even if you're...
That's 5, right?
That's great. Yeah, perfect. I guess even if you're not specifically in love with the problem you're solving, you have to at least be in love with the problem solving, right? Because sometimes, I found it throughout my career. I've worked in lots of different sectors, and I've not necessarily been passionate about each sector I'm working in, but I'm passionate about trying to, solve the equation to make things work and to try and, you know, get things moving in the right direction. So you have to have that passion at heart anyway.
For sure.
Perfect.
Or something related to the job, right? But at least something, right?
Yeah.
Life is too short.
100%. And I'll bear in mind your point about self-finances. This is an area where I need to improve slightly, I think. So I'll download a few of these apps that can help you monitor that a little bit. Perfect. Well, Dragos has unfortunately...
There's a very easy way to do that.
What's this?
Oh, yeah. Just make a lot more money and then you're always below, basically.
Well, yeah, this is
if you make...
That's the one option, yeah, but maybe not the most sophisticated or smart option to take.
Yeah, and not the most short-term one too, right? But yeah, it can work out. Okay, so we lost Dragos. Sorry, you wanted?
Yeah, we lost Dragos, and Dragos is always the guy who does the intros and the outros. So we've had Enzo Avigo with us here today, the CEO and co-founder at june.so. So do go and check out that site. I've been through some of the resources prior to today, but also today during our conversation as well. Lots of super interesting information on there. Thanks everyone for listening today. This will be episode 8, I believe, of TWIP, the Website Intelligence podcast. You can check us out on YouTube, on Spotify, all the other podcast carriers as well. So yeah, like, share, subscribe, all of that stuff. Enzo, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Matt. It was great to be here. Thanks so much for your time.
Very welcome. And yeah, we look forward to speaking to you again soon. Take care.